Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and I am going to look forward to spending time with you today. I hope you've had a good day. And if you've been listening to the Faith Radio today, you probably just had a great conversation that you heard Susie Larson have with Mark Batterson. And today I've got Dr. Tim Muehlhoff coming on the program in just a minute. I'm really looking forward to talking to Tim. He is a professor of communication at Biola University in Southern California. I don't have to ask him if he's prepped his car for winter like we have to do here in Minnesota. Get everything ready, get your snow tires on. And he is also author of several books, a co-director of the Winsome Conviction Project, and he is a speaker and research consultant for the Center for Marriage and Relationships. Many books include The God Conversation, I Beg to Differ, Winsome Conviction, and Winsome Persuasion, and it goes on and on. So glad to have you back on, Tim.
Well, it's great to be with you. And by the way, I was born and raised in Michigan.
Nice.
So I know about winterizing a car.
Yeah, you got to take it seriously. Otherwise, you don't want to get stranded on a Michigan highway when it's 2 below, right?
You do not.
Yeah.
In California, we have to deal with wildfires, earthquakes, but I'll take it. I mean, I miss fall and I miss winter, but on a limited basis.
Yeah. So the last time we chatted, you had this powerful website going on for a place for people to go have honest and transparent discourse. But today we're going to talk about what happens now when we have had disagreements or we've bumped into each other, and how are we getting along? How are friends, family, coworkers, how do we get along when we don't agree with each other?
So we're a split family. I have 3 adult children, all graduated from Biola University, Bible Institute of Los Angeles, and we're a split family. Half the family went with voting one way. The other half voted the other way. By other way, I mean we didn't vote for one candidate. Sure. And then we had one person who just decided, I'm not going to vote because I'm just so sick of the whole thing.
Okay.
So now that the results are in, 2 of our family members, I mean, say what you want about President Trump, he ran the table.
I guess he did, didn't he?
Yeah, he took those 6 swing states. He took a blue wall and turned it into a red wall. So I basically said this to my family. I'm a diehard Michigan Wolverine fan, college football, and one of my best friends, Ed, is a diehard Ohio State fan. Okay. Sorry. And so when Michigan beats Ohio State, which we've done, by the way, the last 3 years in a row, you don't call him right away, and you don't trash talk, and he knows you're happy because we beat them.
Right.
There needs to be just a little bit of sensitivity about how it went. And by the way, we're not very good this year. And Ohio State's, I think, ranked number 2 in the nation. They are going to beat us like a drum at the end of the year. So just be sensitive to each other. Can the 2 family members be very excited how the election happened? Of course they can. I mean, that's what they wanted to happen. But let's be a little sensitive to the 2 family members that really are concerned about the results of the election and continue to become more concerned as it actually starts to get played out. We just need to have that kind of sensitivity towards each other when you're around each other. That's what I would like to say is, like it's okay for my 2 sons to celebrate with their friends, who I'm sure are over the moon. But when we're together as a family, let's have some sensitivity in how we bring things up and how excited we are about the course of the election.
Mm-hmm. Well, just getting along, loving one another, elevating the relationship above anything else, above any political opinion or above any sports opinion or anything else is really the goal of having a loving family and loving friends. I think that's the highest order. Your thoughts?
So that's what we call the ritual view of communication. There is what we call the transmission view, which is I give you my arguments for why I voted, why I feel the way I feel. But the ritual view really takes its name from those common rituals. We celebrate each other's birthdays. In my family, when somebody comes into the home, you hug them. You get up and you hug them.
Nice.
And I don't care who won the election. We get up and we hug each other.
Love it.
Those are very simple traditions that now more than ever we need to do when you have turmoil happening within the family because of maybe politics or something else happening where the family feels the division. Now those rituals are more important than ever.
Yeah. And as we're looking at the holidays as early as next week, we're going to be confronted with a lot of these realities. And there's going to be probably some tension, probably some situations where people are prayerfully going into the holidays saying, I don't know what it's going to be like when I see Uncle Ed, because he always has got such a strong opinion. And people are a little tense.
So I would say this is going back to my latest book with Sean McDowell called End the Stalemate. And that's where you have to prepare your heart for these big moments, right? Like Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays. The Bible talks about the heart 500 times. And Jesus said it's from the heart that you speak. So the first thing I need to do as Thanksgiving rolls around is I need to prepare my heart. And then I would just simply say this, it takes two to have a conversation. It takes two. So my general piece of advice during holidays is that is not the time to talk about politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not. It's used to be the time that we would eat and then watch the Detroit Lions lose on Thanksgiving Day, but not now.
Not anymore.
Not now, Gil.
Not anymore.
Not now. People are saying we're Super Bowl favorites. If you want any proof that Jesus has risen from the dead, it is that people are saying the Detroit Lions, right? So that is not a time to get into. My personal opinion is Thanksgiving, Christmas is just not the time to pick up these hot button issues. I would let it pass. Like if somebody tried to get me to talk about politics or, the social issue of the day, I think I would say, you know what? I would love to talk to you about this. I just don't know if Thanksgiving is the time to do it, Thanksgiving dinner. So I tell you what, let's do it a week from now.
Yeah, great idea.
And that could be via Zoom if they're from out of town, or just pick up an old-fashioned phone and let's talk to each other. But I'm going to pass on this one. And even though, Bill, I have a debate background. That's how I got through my undergrad days. So you better believe there's an attack dog in me that kind of wants to mix it up, especially when I think I'm right. But Book of Proverbs talks about timing.
Yeah.
Right? Words spoken in the right circumstance, the ancient writers say, is like fine jewelry. So let's be very careful the moments we pick. Have I done the heart work to be ready to have the conversation? And then, is this the right timing to have this kind of an in-depth, what could be volatile conversation?
Is that the same verse, apples of gold in settings of silver?
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Proverbs 25:11. A
Oh,
word,
yeah.
yeah, a word
Yeah.
fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Boy, what a great verse to memorize and have that sort of buried in your heart when it comes to having challenging conversations.
And let me give you another one. A wise person overlooks an insult.
Oh, I love that too.
Right? I teach de-escalation skills. I teach self-defense at domestic violence shelters, as well as just, self-defense to corporations. And I always say the best way to de-escalate is to ignore that comment. Now, if this is a family member, I temporarily ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And then later pick it up. Like a week later say, hey, can I just be honest with you? When you said that about this candidate, or you said this about that issue, I feel like you kind of minimized my perspective. I didn't say anything then because it wasn't the right time, but that kind of did bother me. I mean, it's okay to do it later, but overlook the insult at a holiday setting where you really can't get into it. I mean,
Yeah.
you just can't.
Yeah. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest, a professor of communication at Biola University, author of many books. So, Tim, when we have any kind of interactions with people and things that are said that are offensive, shouldn't we be a little more resilient as followers of Jesus? I mean, we've got a seat at the table, at the King's table. Why would we care? I mean, how offended can we be?
I remember one comp theorist saying, thick skin is a gift from God. It's a gift from God. Like, I think we need to be a little bit more thick-skinned in the fact that if a person says a snarky comment, if they say something, do I have the internal power via the Holy Spirit to overlook that? I mean, can I walk by the power of the Holy Spirit when I feel like somebody's being uncharitable to me? I mean, I think this is what Jesus is saying a little bit, right? Turn the cheek, go the second mile. When your enemy's hungry, feed them, Paul would add. And I think we need to have this attitude of like, I'm secure in who I am for the Lord. I'm secure in my beliefs. And so it's okay for you to question my beliefs and even be a little snarky in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to get addressed later, by the way. I mean, if this is a family member, a friend, a coworker, then I think it's totally appropriate later to have a conversation saying, I didn't appreciate the tone when you mentioned that. But yeah, I like your idea of we should be secure in our faith positionally with Jesus. And that internal conversation you have with yourself is, hey, remember the context. This is a non-Christian family member. This is a person who's been drinking a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is Crazyville. There's kids running. All of us are tired and stressed at Christmas. I'm going to let this one go, is what I'm going to do. For instance, in one of my classes, Bill, a student raised her hand and said, hey, dude. And I just
Called
thought,
you hey, dude?
yeah, hey, dude. I said, excuse me, it's Dr. Dude. And
oh, funny.
actually got a laugh.
Yeah.
And later he emailed me and he said, hey, I'm really sorry. That was my bad. I said,
Okay.
hey, I appreciate the email. And I'd prefer not dude, right, in class, but to use it with humor. See, Bill, I think today's argument culture, we need more G.K. Chestertons, which, remember, he was a contemporary of Lewis. He was
Yeah.
a towering intellect. He weighed probably 340 pounds,
Yeah.
but didn't take himself seriously. He would have these great dinner parties where he'd invite humanists like George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and he would dress up as a donkey. We have these unbelievable pictures of this towering intellect, G.K. Chesterton, dressed as a donkey. And how do you pick a fight with a donkey?
I don't know if you
But I
do.
love that. I love that he kept his sense of humor. And I think today, the death of humor in today's argument culture, boy, it's really evident that we're just not laughing anymore. We're taking everything so seriously.
Yeah. Tim, your comment about working with de-escalation, I find that interesting. I have a regular guest, a gentleman named Dr. Glenn Pickering, and he talks about what he says is the 52-second rule. I don't know if that's something he came up with or something he was just teaching that somebody else came up with. Having said that, he said, if somebody comes in hot and someone's cool, within 52 seconds, they'll probably both be at the same place. They'll both be hot or they'll both be cool.
Oh, I like that. That reminded me of John Gottman, one of the top relational experts
I know him.
today. Yeah, he says the first 30 seconds sets the tone for the entire conversation.
Yeah. Didn't he say that when a couple comes in for counseling, he can tell within 6 seconds if they're going to make it or not?
Oh, okay. So this is for sure. This is Gottman.
Oh, yeah.
So the way I've read Gottman is he said I can watch a couple argue for roughly a minute or two, and within 93 percentile, I can predict whether they'll get a divorce.
Whoa.
Now,
yeah, that is
by the
Gottman.
way, Bill, I can do that too. Like if one person has an axe in their hand, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
I think that's going to end badly.
Yeah.
But so if you know Gottman, you know his four horsemen.
Yes.
Right. That's what he identified as he observed 5,000 couples. And by the way, let's just mention one of them, contempt. So that's one of the four horsemen. We had on our podcast, the Winsome Conviction podcast, we had Arthur C. Brooks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. And he said this, Bill, it was like a drop the mic moment. He said, America doesn't have an anger problem. We have a contempt problem.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I said, okay, define contempt. And he goes, okay, anger can be you and I are mad at each other, but we're family members, we're coworkers, we're church members. Contempt is I'm mad at you, and this church would be better off without you. This family would be better off without you, and I'm no longer talking to you. And he said that is contempt. By the way, how interesting in Romans chapter 14, where Paul is addressing a dispute between Gentile converts and Jewish converts over days and diets. He says, listen, I'm not going to settle this one, but I'm telling you right now, I do not want contempt between the two groups. I want you to be unified.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what a timely word in today's argument culture for church members.
Yeah. One of the things I heard Gottman teach on was conflict is inevitable. So people are going to have conflict, but what makes the difference is the way in which conflict is brought up.
Love it.
Yeah, that makes it very interesting. If you're heading out the door for, a 2-day sales conference and another thing, and I bring up some huge piece of conflict I have with you, that's probably not the right time to do it.
Probably not the right time to do it. So since we're geeking out on Gottman,
yeah,
Gottman says this, and I think it's brilliant. He says, when a couple says to me, we don't argue, he does not take that as a positive.
Oh, no.
He says, tell me why you don't argue. Like, why don't you feel the freedom to argue? Why isn't... And then he's famous for saying, show me a couple who argues, I can save the relationship because they care enough to argue. Remember, stonewalling is another one of the four horsemen where I don't care enough to argue.
Right.
And I'm not going to engage. Gottman says, boy, I might not be able to save that marriage.
Yeah. Tim, let me take a little break. We'll be right back. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest, and we're figuring out how to better get along when we have differences. Tim is the professor of communications at Biola University, and if you have a question or comment or you heard something you'd like clarification on, you can text the question to 877-933-2484. Hi, podcast listener. I'm Bill Arnold, and my theme song says, "What's for dinner?" And like when I'm grilling, I'm paying really close attention. And I know that ideal second to get the food off the grill. Like all good and ideal timings in life, right now would be an ideal time to be a cheerful giver to Faith Radio. Give now to support this podcast so that more people in more places might come to saving faith in Jesus and grow in their relationship and become a fully devoted follower. Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. Welcome to the show. I'm talking to Dr. Dude today. I don't really mean that though. That was a cheap shot. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest, and we're chatting today about getting along, figuring out when we have conflict, how to be best to not let it escalate, but to be loving and kind. And we have got the holidays coming up in front of us. So we were talking a little bit about trying to avoid the wrong kind of environment. Don't bring conflict up at the wrong time. And Wyatt said to me during the break, well, when is the right time? And according to John Gottman, he says, you have to create a space where I say, hey, Tim, do you mind after dinner and take a little walk, if we can sit in those two comfortable chairs? I want to talk to you for about 15 minutes about something. And now we've created a space where we go, okay, you have my undivided attention for 15 minutes.
So far be it for me to disagree with the great John Gottman.
Okay, go ahead.
I would add, by the way, I'd take his royalties any day of the week.
Oh, I know.
I would say that's a good idea contingent on one thing. Is your heart in the right place to have that 15-minute conversation? Because a lot of damage can be done in 15 minutes.
Well, I agree.
A damage can be done in 5 minutes.
Oh, I agree.
So that's where I would say, yes, set that space aside, but only after I've done the preparatory work in my heart before the Lord to, like King David, examine my heart, O Lord, and see if there's any sinful way in me. I would have that preparation of the heart before I actually set aside a physical space to have the conversation.
Mm-hmm. I do like that. So when it comes to being critical, when you're offering a critique or saying, I've got a complaint, how do you do that lovingly versus making it just sound like you're just not being loving?
Well, this is where calm theory, I think, really is beneficial. Via God's common grace is how we know things about psychology, calm theory. There's two levels of communication, not one. There is what we call the content level. That would be the critique itself.
Okay.
That would be things that we want to say and the evidence we have supporting that I think that this was an inappropriate thing to say. That's content. The relational level is made up of the amount of respect between two individuals, the amount of compassion, and the amount of acknowledgement of each other. And by the way, you see this in the scriptures. The most famous one would be Peter, right? Saying, I want you to be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you, content, but do it with all gentleness. And some translations say reverence. That is the relational level. So if you're going to confront a person, you must make sure the relational level isn't violated. I'm not coming across disrespectful. I have compassion for your position, even though I ultimately disagree with it. I am being respectful. And I'm acknowledging your perspective, even if I am ultimately going to disagree with it. We know from calm theory, if you trip up the relational level, people literally do not care about the content of your message.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
That's hard to do, by the way. That's really hard to do when you feel like your emotional button's been pushed.
Yeah.
That's what we created that website. If listeners want to go to endthestalemate.com, you actually get to practice, but not with a real person. You get to practice with two individuals who are going to share perspectives you might disagree with, but we teach you how to work on your heart, how to flow what a person is saying to find common ground and points of disagreement. So you don't need to have bought the book to go there, but it's just endthestalemate.com is a great place to go to practice.
I like that. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest. Tim, let's talk about stonewalling a little bit. That seems to be a strategy many have where you just withdraw, you shut down, and you stop responding. And that's, I don't know, what is your thoughts on stonewallers?
So first, let's be, this is Gottman, another drop the mic moment. The vast majority of stonewallers are men. It's not women who stonewall. It is predominantly men who stonewall. And Gottman explains it's kind of like a nuclear reactor that is starting to melt down. So best thing to do is you shut down the entire facility. So when men feel this anger start to rise, they often will shut down everything because they don't want to get angry. They don't want to lose control. So that could be a good reason to stonewall is, hey, I don't want to lose control right now, so I'm going to stonewall. Gottman is saying if that's habitual, if you habitually stonewall, like in every conversation, then he actually says that's one of the four horsemen. And if a couple habitually does that, they're most likely headed towards divorce based on his research. So again, stonewalling is I no longer care enough about this relationship to argue. Like you're disappointed in me. So what? You've always been disappointed in me. I don't live up to your expectations. Well, guess what? I know that. So why even try? That's why he says, show me a couple who argues. They care enough to argue. They're not stonewalling. I think I can help that relationship.
So, Tim, let's maybe suggest that if you have some non-productive conflict patterns, we could maybe come up and help people with some healthy, productive ones. I think earlier you talked about kind of starting by coming in with a soft landing. I mean, maybe a soft or gentle startup when it comes to talking to someone who you anticipate there could be conflict with.
Well, here you go with more Gottman,
I
Bill.
know, I know.
He's so
This is
helpful. He's so helpful.
and
He
I'm just telling you everything I know about the book I wrote on John Gottman. This is all coming up top of my head.
oh, listen, if you're listening and you've never read a Gottman book, now he's not a believer,
No,
so
he's
we have
not.
to be a little discerning, but his research is used by all Christian researchers. I mean, it's amazing the job that he's done. So he gives the formula for a healthy marriage, a healthy relationship. That is his 5-to-1 ratio. So it's in order when you have a negative comment that was said based on the negative recall bias, it takes five positives to overcome that one negative comment. So if all you do is have negative conversations with a coworker, family member, neighbor, you have to augment that with positive conversations. So that's where it's great for a couple to say, let's call a marital truce. This is in a marriage book I wrote called Marriage Forecasting, all about communication climates in marriage. But a truce means we're not sweeping this under the rug. But listen, for the last week, all we do is have negative conversations. Like we no longer compliment each other. We no longer blah, blah, blah. So
Hmm.
now we're going to call a truce on the negativity. We're now only going to have positive conversations. I think now that's hard to do. Again, we're back to walking in the power of the spirit, but we have to stop that negative communication spiral and we have to turn that thing around. And the only way to do that, Gottman would say, is by overcoming negative comments with a 5-to-1 ratio of positive comment. Now, that doesn't have to be dramatic. That can be sending somebody a text just saying, "How are you? Thinking of you today," smiling when a person walks into a room. I mean, that's kind of what Gottman's talking about.
Hmm. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest. We're going to take a little break and come back and continue our discussion on figuring out ways to get better at interacting with people that we've disagreed with. And we're certainly looking at some holidays coming up where we might have interactions with folks we don't see all the time. We love them, we care about them, but where there could be some challenging discussions ahead. But if you have a question or comment, let me know. 877-933-2484. Be right back.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. Yeah. What's for dinner? Hey. It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
My guest today is Dr. Tim Muehlhoff. He is a professor of communication at Biola University in California. And Tim, I'm just looking through your list of books. Tell me the name of your book again that you wrote with Sean.
It's called End the Stalemate,
That's
Move
right.
from Cancel Culture to Meaningful Conversations.
Yeah. So thank you for that reminder. I'm on a website, and it's got every book but that. Go figure.
No way.
No, I'm serious.
Well, you
Yeah.
can go to my website, drdude. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's not actually it. I wish you had an easier last name to spell.
I know.
Muehlhoff, Muehlhoff. And you
Yep.
got all of your stuff there.
And people can go to our website at winsomeconviction.com and you can get all of our backlog of podcasts and interviews, articles, resources, and things like that.
Yeah. Tim, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about someone else's book. I mean, but we did sort of get on the John Gottman subject, and
Oh,
it
I
is an
love
interesting.
that.
Oh, I know you do. I can tell, but I also want to be talking about the material you've written as well. So feel free to blend the material at any time you like. But some of the stuff about like what Gottman talks about having a gentle startup, and then to have an appreciation and gratitude and respect culture. If that doesn't exist in the home, how do you get it?
Well, I think it has to be, if it's not modeled in the home, then I think it needs to be modeled within the community. And that's the great thing about belonging to a church that's vibrant, that knows how to have disagreements. The pastor models it, being charitable to viewpoints that maybe ultimately we'll disagree with. So it has to be modeled somewhere. And that's the tough spot we find ourselves today in the argument culture is we're seeing and coming off a really contentious presidential election, there were so many examples of unproductive, vitriolic communication. And that really does seep into local communities and families. So that's why Christians are countercultural. We're the ones who love our enemies. We're the ones who speak truth and love. We're the ones who, Peter says, when insulted, 1 Peter 3:9, give a blessing instead.
Right.
That's why today we have such a great opportunity to be light and to say, listen, are we convicted people within evangelicalism? Of course we are. But the way we treat you, even when we disagree with you, is with kindness and respect.
Hmm. So we also have to take responsibility when we're in conversations where we are letting the conversation derail.
Yep. So we call those redressive mechanisms.
Okay.
Can you pull the conversation back to a positive playing field when you feel it's going negative? And that's really important to learn how to do that. And we do address that in End the Stalemate. So it could be something like this. You attack my position in a way that I feel is demeaning. I could say one of two things. I could say, hey, do not talk about my candidate that way. And your candidate is no better, blah, blah, blah. That's negative. We're in the spiral. Or I could step back and say, listen, it's really obvious to me how passionate you are about this issue, that you feel very deeply about this side of the issue. And I want to just commend you for that. Like, you've done your homework, you're passionate, and I really appreciate that. Sometimes it maybe puts me on the defensive a little bit, but I just want to say I appreciate the zeal you have for this topic. Do you see how I just went back to the relational because the content was getting us in trouble?
Yeah. No, I felt the pressure the steam just got released.
Now, that's me on a good day. Whenever my wife and I speak at marriage conferences, which we're going to do this weekend, we always say, hey, here are the Muehlhoffs on a good day. And here are the Muehlhoffs on not a good day. So please don't let your listeners think that, I'm just a virtue of kindness and grace. Oh, my goodness. I was a stand-up comic in college and on the debate team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ooh, combination.
Yeah, you got some chops and some edge, and you got all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. So let's say I'm in a conversation with you. We're in a disagreement. I'm starting to get really flooded, and maybe I'm just a little emotionally overwhelmed at this point. And at that point, if I'm neurologically hijacked, I could go into destructive territory very quickly. Do I give myself a timeout in the other room? What do I do?
I'd give myself a timeout. It doesn't have to be in another room, but I think it's very wise sometimes to say, hey, you know what? And I would place it on me, not you. I would say, listen, I think I need a little bit of a break. I think, listen, I appreciate the conversation. I feel like we're both pretty passionate about this. I just need a breather a little bit. So I'm just going to take a little bit and let's revisit this maybe later tonight, tomorrow. I think taking a relational timeout is a really good idea because, when you hit that tipping point, you're not getting it back. When some things have been said, you may not recover from that. But I wouldn't say, hey, you need a timeout, Bill.
Yeah.
You need to get yourself together. That's sure to escalate. If I put it on myself, I need the timeout. Now, listen, if a person doesn't respect that, I'm still taking the timeout. Like, just because they're no, let's keep talking. We can work this out. Come on. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take the time out, and then I just remove myself from the situation.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I think that's
Tim, what if people bring kind of big news back to the holidays at Thanksgiving, and they drop some enormously huge news, and it sort of blows everybody away? That can be a potential landmine as well. Is that the right time and place to do it?
So if they drop the bomb,
Yep.
the landmine, I would always say, I think it's okay to say I need time to process.
Okay.
So, hey, me and my girlfriend decided we're going to live together, Dad.
Yeah.
We're moving in and it's just awesome. I think it's okay for me to say, you know what, Mike, I need some time to process this. You know what? Um, so I can see that you're very happy about this. But I just need some time to maybe process. Now, that may hurt their feelings that I wasn't super excited. But I think it's okay for me to say, I just need time to process. Well,
Hmm.
what do you think about us living together? Now, I could bite on that and say, come on, what do you think Mom and I think about that? I mean, honestly,
Hmm.
what do you think, right? But that's feeding into the negative spiral. I'm not ready to have that conversation because I just had it dropped on me. I'm not prepared to have it. It would be better to maybe semi-awkwardly table it then have it. And now that person storms out the door and says, you know what, I'll never bring her into this house because you got right. That's damage control right there. So I'd rather have it be a little awkward that obviously they're super excited. I'm not. But I can live with that more than I can live with an explosion happening where a person's really been offended and they storm out of the house.
Hmm. Interesting strategy. Now, you've got a marriage conference coming up this weekend. I've got a message that came in. I'll let you address this, Tim Muehlhoff. And it's I've been married. I have a new spouse who loves to argue and is extremely hair-splitting, particular about many things, and we fight every day. And I don't want to live like this. And I'm tempted to stonewall. He just doesn't understand emotional intelligence, and conflict is too frequent. Our 5-to-1 ratio is really struggling. Can you offer any counsel here?
And Bill, did you say in the beginning of that this was a newly married couple?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we're going back to Gottman one more time.
One
Gottman
more.
says couples will have a really hard year, one of the first 3 years. And he said the vast majority is the first year.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say to this couple, I do want to say to this individual, yeah, it's disappointing to think it's our first year and here we are having these really difficult conversations. But don't feel like you're the anomaly, like we're the only couple who struggles with our first year. That's just not true. I think I would call a truce on your part. I wouldn't engage in continual negative conversations. I don't think that's helping anything. I would look to affirm that person even in the midst when they're not being charitable. I do think this is what Peter is trying to get at when he says, I do not want you to give an insult for an insult. I want you to give a blessing instead. Now, what does he mean by blessing? Go right before he says that. He says, I want you to be sympathetic, kind-hearted, brotherly, charitable. So I do think I try to be those things, even though I feel like another person isn't. If this goes on long enough, it's time to bring in the professionals.
Okay.
I would say marital counseling is a great gift that God has given. You obviously need to check out the credentials of any marriage counselor. But even if your spouse doesn't want to go, I think there's great value of you going by yourself because you're going to need strategies. You're going to need somebody to talk to and get wisdom.
Mm-hmm. So there will be problems that this maybe won't ever get resolved because we've got personality differences, right? So
Yeah, but it
can we?
concerns me. It concerns me that every time they try to talk, it deteriorates,
Yeah.
at least in this person's estimation. The other person might think, hey, we're just having a great, passionate conversation.
Right.
So that's where I think eventually you have to establish the rules of our communication and to say, hey, here's how I would like our conversations to go. How would you like to have them go? And then you try to establish those rules by which you can have harder conversations. And then just find things you can do together. Like my wife and I go do yoga together. We go for walks with our dog. You need to find things that don't produce arguments. I think it's important to let the steam off.
Mm-hmm. Again, find activities in space where you are looking at something loving and kind, and you view each other as precious to one another, and not just in the middle of a conflict or talking about a particular subject. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, I actually quote in my marriage book, Marriage Forecasting, a jazz song called Slow Dance.
Okay.
And it's a great song where the guy says, listen, we just had World War III and we can fuss and fight all night, or let's slow dance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's turn on the radio and
Yeah.
dance and not go back to World War III.
Yeah.
Man, there's some wisdom to pull that off. You're flat out going to have to walk in the power of the Spirit to be the one to suggest slow dancing.
Mm.
And then let me suggest another song actually included in the book. Sarah Groves was more my generation than maybe your younger listener. She wrote an amazing song called Roll to the Middle. She said, everybody is in a marriage bed where you're not talking to each other and the distance you can feel. She said, well, somebody's got to roll to the middle. And she wrote this amazing song about them having a fight. This was a real fight. And she wrote the song right after the fight saying, one of us needs to roll to the middle. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I do too. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is my guest. We're going to take a break and come right back. If you'd like to learn more about Tim, you can go to his website, timmuehlhoff.com, Muehlhoff. Be right back. Well, hopefully I have good ideas every now and then. And here's one. You can download the new and improved Faith Radio app. It's free. And while you're there, you can enter our app exclusive giveaway for a $500 Visa gift card. Download the Faith Radio app today and enter the giveaway for your opportunity to win. Glad to be with Dr. Tim Muehlhoff today. We're talking about conversations with people that we may not be getting along with or disagreeing with. And we've got the holidays coming up, so let's be wise and let's get prepared. Good outcomes usually involve good planning and organizing. So, Tim, how do you organize a conversation?
I would ask 4 questions when I'm actually going to be in the conversation. The very first question is, what does this person believe? Like, what do you believe about politics? What do you believe about how we should spend our money? What do you believe about X, Y, and Z? And when the person speaks, I don't jump in and challenge them.
Okay.
You know, temptation could be, hey, that's not true. I never said that. Or no, I don't think the Bible said. It's too soon to do that, and the conversation will deteriorate. So the first question is simply, all right, tell me what you believe, and I'm not going to interrupt. I'm just going to ask clarifying questions. Second question is, okay, why do you believe it? Like, you just told me what you believe, but tell me why you believe this. Like, who are influential people in your life that have caused you to think this way? What about growing up in the community that you grew up in? Because that's really important, is to understand how we grew up really shapes us, experiences, influential people. And then the third question is very important. Where do we agree? Like, I just listened to you. I can think of 5 ways I disagree, but man, where is one area I think I really do agree? And I would make sure to highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
And then question number 4 is, okay, what is one thing I want to say? Not 5, not 10, because then we'll get flooding, right? We'll flood the person. What is one thing I want to say? And that's going to take real discernment. Like, if you and your teenage son always butt heads over everything,
Mm-hmm.
and you go ahead and do these 4 questions, the answer to question 4 might be, what is one thing I want to say? It might be saying to that child, hey, you know what? We had a good conversation. We didn't raise our voices. I'm really pleased. Thank you. And leave it there. Take the win and
Take
leave
the
it
win.
there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I teach this method, and this is in the Stalemate, I force people to pick one. And Bill, often they want to pick 4 or 5 or 6 things I really want to say. And I say to them, listen, this isn't the only conversation you're ever going to have with this person, right? Play the long game to change the communication climate with that person. So those are the 4 questions I would ask. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? where do we agree with each other? And then lastly, what is the one thing I want to say? That could be another question I want to ask, a clarification. And then the other person asks you those four questions. So now you get to respond and not be impeded or interrupted.
Well, that actually is an organized way to do it.
And
I actually like that. You can have that kind of in the back of your head as follow a little formula.
so let's do a little Mike Tyson quote. Everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face.
That's right.
So everybody has a great plan of how to organize that, but then comes a zinger, then come what you perceive as an insult, and now I'm taking that thing, throwing it out the window.
Yeah.
If you're not listening to me, I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
You make fun of me, I'll make fun of you. And that is a negative communication spiral, and we know how that's going to end. So that's why, and I don't want to be a broken record, but we need to go back to the spiritual life of a Christian. We teach something in the book called breath prayer, which means as I'm talking to you and you're saying something, a hard truth, or you're characterizing me in such a way, I'm literally praying, Lord Jesus, give me mercy. Lord Jesus, let me not be defensive, right? And I'm praying that in de-escalation, we first de-escalate ourselves before we ever de-escalate the other person. And I think breath prayer is one of the ancient ways the church sought to speak truth in love, to de-escalate ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you talk about in your book and the Stalemate is taking the perspective of others. To me, which we've talked about this just now a little bit, but if you can do that, you are being loving and kind and patient, and it shows you really do care about someone. Because I think otherwise we're quick to put people in categories. Go, oh, Tim's one of those guys. Enough. Yep. I know everything I need to know. And I don't know anything about your perspective. I've just written you off or put you in a category.
So perspective taking has two different components. One, I enter into your perspective to understand it. Like, why did you vote the way that you did?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you care about finances, that we need to save all this money? Like help me understand that. But second, I want to feel it. Right? In the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, the writer says, I want you to pray for those in prison, but first, I want you to imagine you're in prison with them, and the pain that their body is feeling is the pain that you feel. Right? Hebrews 4:13. So that's perspective taking. Not only do I enter into your perspective, right? But I want to feel your perspective. Like if you feel like if that person won the election, it's the end of the country. Well, listen, I don't believe that. I didn't believe that on who won the election, but you do believe that, and you feel that deeply. Rather than me try to talk you out of it initially, it'd be better for me to feel that. Like if I honestly felt, based on the outcome of the election, this is the end of our country, man, that would be a really scary place to live. And so I want to enter into that perspective, feel it, understand it at an emotional, intellectual level, then I can address it. But to affirm your fears is a really powerful starting way to approach difficult issues. And it's often neglected today. Like, I don't need to do perspective taking with you. I know everything about you and I disagree with you. Mm-hmm. No, I think, and in the book, we actually do a survey of Old and New Testament where we believe perspective taking is found everywhere throughout the Old and New Testament.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. All right, Tim, it's always a delight having you on, and you're always entertaining to talk to, and you always bring a very fresh, zingy perspective. I haven't used the word zingy in a long time.
Well, let me close with this comment.
Okay.
I'm probably, Bill, and I hope you're not offended, I'm probably going home and sitting in the neighborhood jacuzzi as soon as
Yeah.
What's the temperature in Minnesota right now?
It's about 32 degrees, 33, so it's not horrible. You know, that's...
It's 73 here.
All right. You didn't have to bring that part up.
Yes, but I love the fact that you're turning the other cheek and you're not on my snarky California comments.
No, I'm being gracious. All right, Tim, thank you so much. Have a great time in the hot tub tonight, and thanks for being with me.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, you bet. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff has been my guest. You can learn more about Tim at his website, timmuehlhoff.com. And he spells his last name Muehlhoff. We'll take a break and be right back with Mike Novotny. You know him from Faith Radio right here. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.